consumer awareness of substitute checks, or are we just discussing Reg CC here? In general, disclosure must contain the following information: that a substitute check is the legal equivalent of an original check, and that the consumer re-credit rights that apply when a substitute check is not properly charged to his or her account. Distribution. Of this disclosure, I would presume. Banks must provide the disclosure to all consumers who receive paid original checks or paid substitute checks with their periodic statement. This notice must be sent no later than the first scheduled communication after October 28th of 2004. In the case of new accounts, a notice must be given at the time of a new account opening. And this is still a requirement that new account holders get substitute check disclosures. Disclosures for customers who receive substitute checks on an occasional basis. Banks must provide the disclosure to consumers who request an original copy of the check and receive a substitute check, and to consumers who receive a returned unpaid check that is in the form of a substitute check. Meaning that if we are sending the customer a substitute check because we don't have an original check to send to them, and this is in the correction of an item or in response to a request from the consumer to receive a check, and we're providing a substitute check, we must also give them a substitute check disclosure. This is still a requirement. Multiple account holders. The bank is not required to give separate disclosures to customers on jointly held accounts, and a bank may deliver disclosures electronically if the recipient agrees. FIRA penalties. Penalties of $7,500 per day for violations of laws and regulations. 2. Penalties up to $37,500 per day if violations or unsafe or unsound practices are engaged in recklessly or are part of a pattern of misconduct and causes more than a minimal loss to the bank and a pecuniary gain to the parties involved. And 3. Penalties up to $1.375 million per day against persons who knowingly commit a violation or knowingly or recklessly cause a substantial loss to the bank or a substantial benefit to the party. That would be the end of Reg CC, I want to say, in its entirety. But because it's such a difficult reg to read, I'm going to read the sample notices here in the back because that's how it's explained to consumers. The initial delayed funds availability notice must include 1. This notice generally describes the bank's delayed funds availability policy. This notice informs the bank's customer of the bank's general policy of making funds from check deposits available on the next business day. And 2, this portion of the notice describes the case-by-case and exception holds that can be put on some deposits. And lastly, 3, the last portion of the notice describes the bank's policy on funds deposited by checks into new accounts. So, under the delayed funds availability disclosure, Section 1, your ability to withdraw funds. Our policy is to make, and this is an example, is to make funds from your cash and check deposits available to you on the first business day after the day we receive your deposit. Electronic direct deposits will be available on the day we receive the deposit. Once they are available, you can withdraw the funds in cash, and we will use the funds to pay checks that you have written. For determining the availability of your deposits, every day is a business day, except for Saturdays, Sundays, and federal holidays. If you make a deposit before 3 p.m. on a business day that we are open, we will consider that day to be the day of your deposit. However, if you make a deposit after 3 p.m. or on a day we are not open, we will consider that the deposit was made on the next business day we are open. That's just a sample cutoff time. Other banks can differ. Longer delays may apply Section 2. In some cases, we will not make all of the funds that you deposit by check available to you on the first business day after the day of your deposit. Funds may not be available until the second business day after the day of your deposit. For the first $100 of your deposits, however, may be available on the first business day. So this is wrong, and I'm happy that I have that this wasn't fixed since it changed in 2011, but it's supposed to be $200 available on the next business day after the day of your deposit. If we are not going to make all of the funds from your deposit available on the first business day, we will notify you at the time you make your deposit. We will also tell you when the funds will be available. If your deposit is not made directly to one of our employees, or if we decide to take this action after you have left the premises, we will mail you the notice by the day after we receive your deposit. If you will need the funds from a deposit right away, you should ask us when the funds will be available. In addition, funds you deposit by check may be delayed for a longer period under the following circumstances. A, we believe the check you deposit will not be paid. B, you deposit checks totaling more than $5,000 in one day. C, you redeposit a check that has been returned and paid already. D, you have overdrawn your account repeatedly in the last 6 months. And lastly, there is an emergency such as a failure of communication or computer equipment. We will notify you if we delay your availability to withdraw funds for any of these reasons, and we will tell you when the funds will be available. They will generally be available no later than the number of business day after the day of your deposit. So you have to insert the number there. And lastly, the special rules for new accounts. If you are a new customer, the following special rules apply during the first 30 days of your account is open. Funds from electronic direct deposits to your account will be available on the day we receive the deposit. Funds from deposits in cash, wire transfers in the first 5,000 of a day's total deposits of cashiers, certified tellers, travelers, and federal, state, and local government checks will be available on the first business day after the day of your deposit if the deposit meets certain conditions. For example, the checks must be payable to you, and you may have to use a special deposit slip, which we do not use in my bank. The excess over $5,000 will be available on the 9th business day after the day of your deposit. If your deposit of these checks other than a U.S. Treasury check is not made in person to one of our employees, the first $5,000 will not be available until the second business day after the day of your deposit. Funds from all other check deposits will be available on the 10th business day after the day of your deposit. Let's see if there's any more disclosures here. They didn't give us a substitute check disclosure. That's funny. It explains what they are, and it explains what the error resolution procedures are and how quickly claims need to be made. The end.